After about 2.5 years of searching, I've determined that the job market is not worth participating in. That's how I started an article I recently wrote on LinkedIn about this whole situation and my experience over the last few years. I'll leave a link to that in the description in case you want to read the whole thing in its entirety. It's about a 10-minute read, so I'm not going to go through every single part of it, but in this video, I am going to just cover the key parts briefly. And if you hadn't heard, a few weeks ago, the United States had the biggest downward revision in the jobs report in history. There was only, I think, 22,000 jobs created when originally it was some very big six-figure number. And if you look back over the last few years of that data that comes out every month, it's a total of about 2 million jobs lost. And I was having a hard time with it myself for some time because I thought it was just me, right? It's impossible to know what everyone else is going through out there, and after so many failed attempts, so many interviews gone wrong, so many conversations with recruiters, and on, like I'll get into here in a sec, I didn't know what else to think. But then recently I came across some YouTube videos where people were just reacting to a whole bunch of short form videos that people had posted on TikTok and elsewhere about their experience and how hard it is to get a job, basically. So it drives you insane because you're doing the same thing over and over again while expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. And it feels like you don't have a choice because you have to keep trying, right? You can't just let a few rejections get you down and just give up. But in my case, and in many other people's cases, it's not just a few rejections. It's a pattern, a constant, never-ending, repeating pattern that doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And it's so persistent that everyone I've told about it thinks it's unbelievable. They think it's the weirdest thing ever. And I remember my dad at one point even saying, you got to tell that recruiter they're doing something wrong, because I had told the same kind of story so many times. And it made sense for him to think that, although it wasn't any one recruiter. It was a whole bunch of them, right? Recruiters and hiring managers and everybody else you could think of. So I created this list here. And keep in mind as I go through this, these are just things that I can recall from memory. I didn't keep a written record of every single thing that happened because every time I just thought this is going to be it and it's going to be great. This is a great opportunity. I'm a perfect fit. Everyone I talked to we seem to get along well. And so I just couldn't imagine why it didn't work out. And then that happens, 50, 100 times. And next thing you know, all this time has gone by. Anyway, some rough numbers to start off with. I filled out at least 1,200 applications, 1,000 manually, and 200 using AI. I actually learned there are tools to automate your job application process that make it a whole lot easier. And there's agents basically that just you upload your resume and filter what kind of jobs you want, and it finds them, and you can select or deselect them, and then it'll just apply automatically. You just let it run on your computer for a few hours, however long it takes. But I only applied to 200 using that because this is when it wasn't too long after I started using that I realized what's going on here. And it worked. I mean, I got 3 interviews in the space of like a week or two. But of course, none of those led to anything because none of them ever do 95% of the time, let's just say. I also spoke with about 50 to 100 recruiters, I would guess. I mean, there was a 6-month period in 2023 alone where I talked to 18 different recruiters. And back then it was easy to keep track because I could just go through my LinkedIn inbox. In that short a period of time, I could just find them all. And I remember that number, specifically 18. It was like April to October of 2023 or something like that. And I've had scores of interviews. I don't know if it's 20, 40, 60, maybe closer to 100. I really have no idea. And I would guess that majority of those, so over 50%, I made it to the final interview. And in almost all of those cases, I was pretty certain I had gotten the job, that it was a done deal. And with one or two exceptions, it never was. And for a full-time job, there was no exception. It was 100% of the time I never got it. I'll get into more of that. So there was one part-time job that lasted about 9 months. One part-time job lasted about 2 months. And another contract gig that gave a small amount of work for a few years. And that's it. And the thing is, that's a better result than a lot of people ever get. There's way worse horror stories out there. I was just inspired to share mine because I've been seeing all the stuff out there from people who are maybe just recently realizing how bad this situation is. And I guess that made me realize it too, because I didn't know other people were having this experience. Again, I thought it was just something unique to me for whatever reason, even though looking back, that doesn't really make any sense, especially considering I used to get 90% of jobs or contract gigs that I interviewed for. It was just, I don't know, it was easy and simple. There was no problem. People came to me, recruiters came to me, and I'd talk to them, and things would just go through normal, kind of how you would expect, how it should be. And for years, I had to turn people away because I either had too much on my plate or I just wasn't interested in that job. And since then, I, expanded my horizons. I was open to different types of work, lower paying work, in office and hybrid positions in my local area. None of that mattered. I expanded things as much as I possibly could in every way, and none of that helped at all. I'd say from about 2023 onward, it all fell apart. And no matter what I've done since then, doesn't matter. It's as if jobs themselves are not real anymore. It doesn't make any difference what it is, what you do, your resume, being professional, what experience you have, how good or bad you are at interviewing, what you open yourself up to. Like, just none of it makes any difference. It's really wild and crazy making. So let me go through this article again here. One problem is that a lot of job listings are fake, and I always heard about this. I didn't really know how bad it was, and it's gotten bad enough that there's actually a bill introduced in California that would make it illegal for companies to post fake job listings. Because right now it's actually not considered fraud, because the way I understand it, at least, is no one loses anything material from applying to a fake job listing. It's not like they're being stolen from or something. And there's no specific law against doing that right now. So it's legal for companies to do it. And I won't get into all the reasons why they do it. I'm sure there's a lot of content out there on that subject, but it's just to make people think that they're hiring more, they're expanding, or get investors to think they're doing better, all that kind of stuff. But in my case, and the examples I'm about to get into here shortly, I don't think most of the jobs were fake. I mean, if you apply to thousands of jobs and you never hear back from anything, then there's a pretty good chance that most of those were fake, and that's a big part of the problem. And while I did have to fill out a ton of applications, like almost everyone does today, the biggest frustration for me was what happened after the interviews, because none of it made sense. So I'm just going to get into a few of the most ridiculous stories here in no particular order. I don't want to call out companies by name in this video. I just feel like it's not right. I did call them out in this LinkedIn article, though, and not a lot of people read those, though. I don't know. I mean, I think the post got like 900 views, but in terms of actual article reads, it's like less than 100. So It's there if you're curious and you want to see. I'm just going to go through these one by one. And these are the ones that I have in this article, the ones that I could recall from memory as soon as I started writing this thing a week or two ago. So, one crypto wallet company, a recruiter reached out to me about, it was a content strategist position. The interview was scheduled a week in advance. I spent many hours preparing. And then 2 hours before the interview was supposed to happen, the person canceled. I get 2 emails, one canceling Zoom call and one from the person saying, actually, your background isn't the right fit. Sorry, I know I reached out to you and I scheduled an interview with you and I let it be scheduled for a whole week. But now, 2 hours before the fact, suddenly I realized your background isn't the right fit. Which didn't make sense however you look at it, because everything about my background matched the job description on a one-to-one basis. It was like, if you look at my resume and you look at the job description, you could just match things perfectly like that. Anyway, moving on. There's a crypto analytics platform where I had 4 interviews, 4 rounds. And I remember this was one that I was kind of overqualified for. It was pretty easy, part-time thing, social media management, I think. All the interviews went really well. It seemed like everyone was my long lost best friend. Like, we got along and it was a good time and I had great answers to all the questions. So just everything lined up, seemed so perfect. Thought it was a done deal. And a few days later, I got a generic rejection letter. An investment app, kind of like a Robinhood competitor, had 2 interviews for a content creator job. Didn't get it, don't know why. Then there was a company that I had worked for, a media company I had worked for in the past for a long time, and I knew some people there. And I thought I was a shoo-in, and I even asked my old editor there, said, hey, I just applied for this thing, you think you could get me an interview there? And they got me in to the front of the line, so to speak, and had the first interview, went really well. And they basically just said, oh yeah, this is yours more or less. You just need to talk to this guy to make sure you know XYZ subject matter. I was like, okay, whatever. I do know that, so no problem. And in the second interview, this guy just starts asking all these developer level questions about different crypto projects that I had no idea how to answer. Like, what do you think about Solana's architecture? Or what are your thoughts on Ethereum's latest, BIP 3462 upgrade? What's your favorite tokenomic? Do you have a favorite tokenomic structure? Like, all the stuff that was not relevant to the position was entitled content lead. It was a marketing position. And those questions I feel like would be more appropriate for a developer, maybe. Like, anything I needed to know on those subjects, I could easily research in 10 minutes, maybe less. But it didn't matter. So, of course, I didn't get that job either. Crypto exchange. I had an interview in 2023 that went well with this one. Then they just said they put hiring on hold. And in 2025, just a few weeks ago, a recruiter from there reached out to me again about a different marketing position. And they canceled a few hours before it was scheduled. And at first I said, okay, let's reschedule. But then I changed my mind. I just said, you know what? Let's not do it because I don't think my background is a good fit. And that's what they always say afterwards anyway, even if things went perfectly well. So that's the one and only time I actually actively said no to something. But I knew that looking at the requirements and job description, I wasn't really a great fit to begin with. It actually wasn't my thing. It wasn't the job for me. And so I just cut that one off preemptively. So there's a few I don't remember the names of. Like, there was a recruiter based out of the UK who said I was a great fit for this thing. I could get an interview tomorrow because they want to start really soon. And you're just like the perfect fit. You have all the right experience and everything. And you can get the higher end of the salary range because you're so experienced and well known and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, great, yeah, I'll do the interview tomorrow. 3 days go by and he ghosts, and I followed up, and eventually he said my background is not what they were looking for. So same old story, even though he said the opposite of that. So don't know what happened there. Another crypto exchange was basically the same exact story as what I just said, where I was told it all looked good, and then all of a sudden it's not. And that same type of thing has repeated itself a good 15 to 20 times, I would say. 15 to 30 times, really, and I just can't recall all of them. There's another time I had 2 interviews and a test assignment that took a long time. I was told the final interview was more or less a formality, that I was going to get the job. Of course I didn't. There was one encrypted messaging app company where I had a great interview and a short unpaid test assignment. Followed up 5 times over the course of like 2 weeks after that. Got ghosted completely. There was one crypto startup through an agency where I had 2 great interviews and a paid test assignment. It all seemed great, but then they sent me a long, thoughtful rejection, and that was it. There's a layer 2 Bitcoin protocol. I also had a paid test assignment for, and 2 really good interviews. I didn't get it. 2 interviews for a content strategist role. One of them went well, one of them a little less so. And this is one of the few cases where I can kind of understand why they didn't hire me, because I may not have done that great. There may have been a question or 2 that I didn't have the best answers for, but it was also weird because they didn't really ask the right questions, in my opinion. And some of them would be kind of rapid fire, and so I would like not answer one completely before moving on to the next, I think. And I could see in one of the guys' faces that he was like unhappy with the answer. And later I realized, oh no, I didn't really address this one thing. But anyway, there's just weird types of things like that even though I accept some responsibility for this one, it's also not entirely my fault, because things like that happen all the time, and other interviews are just very smooth and nothing goes wrong. So here's another crypto exchange. One time there was half a dozen recruiters literally who reached out to me about the same copywriter position, and I just responded to the first one, and the call went well, and she was gonna get me in, and then she just ghosted. There's another time someone reached out about a PR manager role. I applied, gave them my resume. They said, oh yeah, this is great, I'll forward it to the hiring manager. I followed up a few times. They said, oh, I'll let you know when they get back. They ghosted. There was one time I had 2 interviews for a full-time hybrid position in Kaysville, Utah. The person said they loved my background, give my resume to the hiring manager, all that. And I had a recruiter call, screening call, and then an interview on the phone, and the final interview was going to be in person, and it was supposed to happen the following week. They ghosted for, I don't remember how long, 3 or 4 weeks at least, and I kept following up the recruiter, half a dozen times, and eventually he finally got back to me and said, oh, they went with someone else with specific experience in Internet of Things writing. Another crypto exchange. They responded to my cold outreach. I had 2 interviews that went well, and then after 2 months they came back and said they didn't have budget. There's a Bitcoin company I can't remember the name of. Someone reached out to me to schedule an interview, and it kept being canceled at the last minute 3 times in a row. I'd be ready for this thing, and with 15 minutes to spare, or even less than that, it would just get canceled. So I lost half an hour every time because I had that time blocked out. And then after the 3rd time it was canceled, I get an email saying, oh, actually, we're not prioritizing this right now. Another project, I can't remember the name before. I had this one call with 2 people. They said they had an urgent need, and it was going to start real soon. It went well, and they said they'd be in touch in the next few days because the work was going to have to start the next week. They ghosted completely. Even though I followed up, they just never responded. And then there was a layer 2 protocol, I can't remember. I had a first interview that seemed to go well, and then I just got a rejection letter for no reason. And this list may seem long, but it's not, because as I mentioned, this is only a fraction of the things that I can just write down from memory. And there are lots of times when 3 or 4 things happen in the same week and they all kind of become a blur. And if I had been keeping track of every single time something like this happens, that list that I just read would probably be 3 or 4 times longer, I'm guessing, maybe more. And there's more. So I probably should have mentioned this at the start, but my old career involved being a copywriter, journalist, SEO writer, content writer, marketer for fintech companies, Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain companies, and publications. And I was freelancing for a long time. The last few years, I decided to look for a full-time job or something like that. And it just didn't work. So now I'm going to get into briefly everything I did to try and get freelance clients, because everything I just described was full-time job search, typical 9-to-5 type stuff. I also did a whole bunch of other stuff, like reaching out to all my former clients. None of them cared. None were interested. I got a new website, revamped my portfolio and my resume. I expanded my niche and expertise, branching out into different areas. I sent hundreds of cold emails and DMs for targeted cold outreach. I created a ton of content to try and attract clients. Even hired a video editor and a social media manager at one point so I could crank out all types of content and just post it everywhere all the time. I added thousands of connections to my LinkedIn network. I'm at over 11,000 strong today, although I'm pretty sure I'm shadow banned on there because a lot of my posts only get 100 or 200 impressions. Now and then they'll get 1,000 or 2,000, but still, that's not very much for 11,000 followers. So obviously my content doesn't get shown to more than a fraction of my network for whatever reason. And last but not least, I hired a team to do outreach for me, and they sent somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 messages over a 5-month period. It led to nothing. I had, I think, 5 or 6 sales calls that were all totally unqualified and not ready to start any kind of project. And so that was a total waste. And my conclusion from all this is just that jobs as we've known them are more or less a thing of the past. It's just not a thing anymore. This is not how it works. And I don't know there's any one culprit to blame necessarily. I mean, AI is definitely a factor because so many things can be automated now. Like, I don't even have a short form video editor anymore because using Opus Clip AI, I can just take the link from this long form YouTube video, copy paste it into there, and it'll create 20 or 30 clips, and then I can use their AI editor to create AI generated B-roll content and put that into parts of the video. It does captions automatically, all of that. So there are a lot of things that are being automated. Companies are hiring less and using AI for more. There's probably one person doing the job that 5 people used to do with the help of AI now in a lot of cases, especially in anything even remotely related to tech or software or anything like that. But it's not just that, I don't think, because there also seems to be a huge economic slowdown happening, and that's a whole nother topic that I'll get into more in other videos, I'm sure. But the thing that matters now is just that if you're looking for a regular job, your odds are not very good. And in my opinion, it's best to try to figure out something else to do. I mean, there are some opportunities. They're not easy, but especially with all the AI tools out there now, there are some easier ways to be an entrepreneur, right? Like some people have created AI influencers on Instagram that make six figures. There's faceless AI YouTube channels, and there's new, even though millions of jobs have been eliminated, there are some new fields emerging like AI ethics and policy and AI consultants and things like that. So that's another route. But I really think unless you, and there's investment opportunities obviously, but I really think unless you either find a way to pivot into something AI related or use AI in your own entrepreneurial pursuit, there's really no other way to go. So I don't want this to be a doom and gloom type of thing. I don't think the situation is hopeless, even though, going through all that, it sounds bad because it is bad. But I think it's just a matter of a changing world, changing landscape, and while it's going to be bad for some people, it's also going to be good for others. And in every past technological revolution, there's been some ordinary people who profited. Yes, there's some, big technocrats or billionaires who get really rich, but then there's also a small group of regular individuals who do well for themselves also. So, yeah, I don't know what to say other than all of that. I hope someone out there finds this and realizes that it's not just them. I think that's the main reason I wanted to create this. What inspired me to create it was seeing other people share their experience like this. And I never really thought to do that because I thought it was just something wrong with me, or I just had terrible luck. Like I'm hexed, I'm cursed. Somebody cast a witchcraft spell on me. I need to go get a tarot reading, consult with a psychic to see what's wrong with my energy, my karma, or something like it. That's where my mind started to go because I was just going insane, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results because it seemed logical to expect that, hey, at some point something's got to change, right? But I really don't think it ever will now. And while I'll still continue to respond to recruiters who reach out to me, I don't really think I'm going to be pursuing any kind of regular job. And I'm not going to be freelancing in the same way either. I'm just going to focus on things that can be a different source of income, like a newsletter, like YouTube, like podcast, and just be a solo creator in that way. Even though it's going to be really tough, I don't really see another option. And other people have done it before me, starting from less. I have somewhat of an audience already built up from what I've been doing the last 8 years. So if you've made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching or listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's free and it helps me out a lot. And like I said, I'll put a link to that LinkedIn article in the description here. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and I'll also put, if I have it ready by the time I post this, I'll put a link to my newsletter because it was on Substack. I'm moving it over to Beehive because I think that's a better platform, but more on that later. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.